Everything started 3 weeks ago. That night I came home late and headed to the kitchen in an exhausted state. While getting water from the fridge, I heard a sound from upstairs. At first I thought it was the wind, but then I clearly distinguished that voice. It was my own voice. Upstairs in my bedroom, someone was speaking with my voice. My heartbeat quickened. I knew I was alone at home. I had checked everywhere before locking the door. But now that sound coming from the ceiling belonged to me, yet it wasn't me producing it. I stood frozen in the kitchen, holding the water glass in my trembling hand. The voice continued. It was having a conversation with someone. My voice was answering questions, asking things, laughing. But I was downstairs, silent and terrified. I slowly climbed the stairs. Each step felt like it took an eternity. The voice grew louder. It was definitely coming from my bedroom. When I reached the door, I pressed my ear against it. My voice inside was saying things I had never said, talking about places I had never been. It mentioned names I didn't recognize, described events that never happened in my life. But the tone, the accent, every little detail was perfectly mine. I gathered my courage and opened the door. The room was empty. Completely empty. The voice stopped the moment the door opened. I searched everywhere. Under the bed, inside the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing. No one. I checked my phone, thinking maybe I had left a recording playing. Nothing. My laptop was off. No device in the room could produce that sound. I convinced myself it was fatigue. Working long hours, lack of sleep, maybe I was hallucinating. I got into bed but couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every sound made me jump. Finally, as morning approached, I dozed off. The next day I went to work as usual. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me anyway? But throughout the day I felt uneasy. Like someone was watching me. When I returned home that evening, I did a thorough check of the entire house again. Everything was normal. 2 days passed without incident. I started to relax, thinking maybe it really was just fatigue. But on the third night it happened again. This time I was in the living room watching something on the screen. The voice came from upstairs again. My voice. This time it was clearer, more distinct. It was talking to someone on the phone. Having a casual conversation. Laughing, joking around. I ran upstairs without thinking. Burst into the room. Empty again. But this time something was different. My phone was on the bed. I hadn't left it there. I always put it on the nightstand. I picked it up with shaking hands. The call log showed nothing. No recent calls. But the phone felt warm, like it had just been used. That night I couldn't sleep at all. I sat on the couch downstairs with all the lights on. I was trying to make sense of what was happening. Maybe someone had broken in and was playing tricks on me. But how could they imitate my voice so perfectly? And why? What was the purpose of this? The following days I installed security devices around the house. Small recording gadgets in every room. If that voice appeared again, I would catch it. I would have proof. 3 days passed quietly. Nothing happened. I started checking the recordings every night. Hours of footage. Nothing unusual. Then on the 7th night I heard it again. But this time it wasn't upstairs. It was in the basement. My voice echoing from below, talking to someone. I grabbed my phone and rushed down the stairs. The basement was dark and cold. I turned on the light. Empty. Just old boxes, storage items gathering dust. But the voice continued. It was coming from the corner behind the old furniture. I moved the boxes aside, pushed the furniture. Behind them was the concrete wall. Nothing else. But the voice was right there. Right behind that wall. Talking. Discussing something serious. My voice sounded reed concerned about something. I pressed my ear against the cold concrete. The voice was clearer now. It was talking about me. About my life. But the details were wrong. It mentioned a sister I never had. Talked about a childhood in a place I never lived. Described a job I never worked. I ran back upstairs and checked the recording devices. I reviewed the footage from the basement. There I was on the screen going down the stairs, turning on the light, moving the boxes. But there was no voice. No sound except my footsteps and breathing. The recording captured nothing. The voice only I could hear. This realization terrified me more than anything. Was I losing my mind? Was this some kind of mental breakdown? I made an appointment with a doctor. During the examination, I explained everything. The doctor suggested stress and prescribed medication for anxiety. Said I should rest more, maybe take a few days off work. I took the medication, but it didn't help. The voice continued appearing at random times. Sometimes in the middle of the night. Sometimes during the day when I just got home. Always my voice. Always saying things I never said. Living a life I never lived. 2 weeks after it all started, I decided to record the voice with my phone. The next time I heard it, I would capture it. Prove to myself I wasn't insane. That night it happened again. The voice came from the bathroom. I grabbed my phone, started recording, and walked toward the sound. My voice inside was singing. A song I didn't know. In a language I couldn't identify. I kicked the door open. Empty. But this time I kept recording. Pointing the phone at the empty room. The voice continued for a few more seconds, then stopped. I played back the recording immediately. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. The recording captured everything. But what I heard made my blood run cold. It wasn't just my voice in that bathroom. There were two voices. Mine. Both of them mine. One was singing that unknown song, the other was humming along. Two versions of my voice in an empty room. I left the house that night. Went to stay with my brother across town. I told him I needed a change of environment, that work was stressing me out. He didn't ask many questions. I spent 3 days there, sleeping on his couch. No voices. No sounds. Nothing strange. I started to feel better. Maybe being away from that house was all I needed. But when I returned home, I knew immediately something was wrong. The house felt different. Like someone had been there. Nothing was missing, nothing was moved. But the air felt different. Heavy. Oppressive. I went through each room carefully. Everything looked normal until I reached the bedroom. On my bed there was a notebook. My notebook. The one I used for work notes. But I had left it in my bag downstairs. I picked it up and opened it. The pages were filled with writing. My handwriting. Pages and pages of notes. But I hadn't written any of it. The notes described days I didn't remember living. Conversations with people I never met. Details about places I never visited. It was like reading someone else's diary written in my handwriting about a life that wasn't mine. The entries were dated. They started 3 months ago. Long before I first heard the voice. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. The entries became more frequent, more detailed as they progressed. The last entry was dated yesterday. while I was at my brother's house. The entry described a normal day. Waking up, going to work, coming home. But I wasn't here yesterday. I was across town. I dropped the notebook and backed away from the bed. This was impossible. All of this was impossible. I grabbed my phone and called my brother. Asked him to confirm I was at his place for the last 3 days. He said yes, asked if I was okay. I hung up without answering. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, staring at the stairs, waiting for the voice. It came at 3 in the morning. But this time it wasn't upstairs or in the basement. It was right behind me. My voice whispered in my ear, so close I felt breath on my neck. It said, "Welcome home." I spun around. Nobody there. Just empty space. But the voice continued whispering. It told me things. Secrets about myself I never shared with anyone. Memories I thought I had forgotten. It knew everything about me. Every detail, every moment of my life. Then it said something that made me freeze. It told me about tomorrow. About things that would happen. Specific details. A coworker would spill coffee. My bus would be late by 7 minutes. I would receive a call from an unknown number at 2:15 in the afternoon. I spent the next day in a daze. Everything the voice predicted came true. Every single detail. The coffee spill. The late bus. The call at exactly 2:15. On the other end of that call was silence. Just breathing. My breathing. Now it has been 3 weeks. The voice appears every day, sometimes multiple times. It no longer hides in other rooms. It speaks directly to me. Tells me things. Shows me things I shouldn't know. Yesterday it told me about a conversation my brother would have with his partner. Word for word. I called him later that evening. He confirmed every detail without knowing why I was asking. I don't know what this is. I don't know what is happening to me. The voice sounds exactly like me, but it knows things I don't. It lives a life parallel to mine. Sometimes I wonder if I am the real one. Maybe I am the echo. Maybe somewhere there is another version of me living the life these voices describe. And I am just a shadow experiencing fragments of that existence. The worst part is I am starting to recognize the voice's life more than my own. The places it mentions feel familiar. The people it talks about seem real. More real than my own memories. Sometimes I catch myself responding to the voice. Having conversations with it. Answering its questions. Last night it asked me a question that I cannot stop thinking about. It asked, "Do you remember who you were before you became this?" I didn't have an answer. I still don't. When I look in the mirror now I see my face, but I am not sure if I recognize the person staring back. The voice is becoming stronger, clearer. And I am fading. This morning I woke up and couldn't remember how I got to bed. The last thing I remember is sitting on the couch. Now I am here in my bedroom and it is afternoon. Hours are missing. I checked my phone. There are messages I don't remember sending. Calls I don't remember making. All from this morning during those missing hours. The voice is quiet now. It hasn't spoken since I woke up. The silence is worse than the talking. Because now I am wondering what happened during those hours I cannot remember. What did I do? Where did I go? Or more terrifying, what did the voice do while using my body? I am writing this down because I need to document what is happening while I still can. While I still remember who I am. The boundary between the voice and me is blurring. Soon I might not be able to tell the difference. Soon I might become the voice. Or maybe I already am. Maybe I have been the voice all along and the person I think I am is the echo, the shadow, the copy. Tonight I will try to stay awake. I will try to catch the moment when the transition happens. When I become the voice or when the voice becomes me. I need to know which one of us is real. I need to understand what I am. But I am terrified of what I might discover. Terrified that the answer will be worse than not knowing. The sun is setting now. Darkness is coming. And with it the voice will return. I can feel it waiting. Patient. Inevitable. Ready to continue the conversation we have been having. The conversation where I am both speaker and listener. Both question and answer. Both self and other. I heard my own voice, but I wasn't the one speaking. Now I am not sure if I ever was. Moving to a new town was supposed to be a fresh start. After years of saving, I finally bought a small house on the outskirts of a quiet neighborhood. The realtor told me it was a great opportunity. The previous owner had left suddenly and the price was lower than market value. I didn't ask many questions. I should have. The first time I saw the house I felt something strange. Not bad exactly. Just familiar. Like I had seen it before, maybe in a dream. The realtor showed me around, pointing out features, talking about renovations. But I barely listened. I was too distracted by the feeling that I already knew this place. When we entered the kitchen, I walked directly to a cabinet and opened it. Inside were old dishes left behind by the previous owner. The realtor seemed impressed that I found them without asking. Said most people never check that cabinet. I didn't tell her that I somehow knew they would be there. I bought the house that same week. Moving in was easy since I didn't have much furniture. As I unpacked, I kept experiencing these moments of recognition. I would reach for a light switch without looking and my hand would land exactly where it needed to be. I would walk through dark rooms without stumbling, knowing instinctively where the furniture was even though I had just placed it there. The first night in the house I had a dream. I was walking through the rooms but everything looked different. The walls were painted another color. Different furniture. Different decorations. But it was definitely the same house. In the dream I lived here. This was my home. I knew every corner, every detail. When I woke up, the dream felt more like a memory than imagination. Days passed and the feeling intensified. I would be doing something simple like making breakfast and suddenly I would remember doing the exact same thing before. Same movements, same sequence. But these weren't real memories. They couldn't be. I had never lived here before last week. One morning I was in the backyard and noticed a loose stone in the patio. Without thinking, I lifted it. Underneath was a small metal box. Rusted and old. I opened it. Inside was a collection of items. A key ring with no keys. A faded photograph of people I didn't recognize. A small notebook with water-damaged pages. And a letter. The letter was addressed to someone named Thomas. The handwriting was shaky, difficult to read. It talked about mistakes and regrets. About choices that couldn't be undone. The writer apologized for what they had done. For the lies. For the secrets buried in this house. The letter ended abruptly, like the writer had been interrupted. I put everything back and replaced the stone. That night I researched the house's history online. It had changed hands several times over the past 20 years. Most owners stayed only a year or two before selling. The records showed nothing unusual. No deaths, no crimes. Just a regular house with a high turnover rate, but something about that letter bothered me. I kept thinking about it. About Thomas. About the buried secrets. That night I dreamed again. This time I was Thomas. I was living in this house. I had a routine. Every morning I would make coffee in that same kitchen. Every evening I would sit in the backyard by that same patio. The dream felt so real, so detailed. I could taste the coffee, feel the texture of the chair, hear the birds in the trees. When I woke up, I remembered something from the dream. A hiding place. Behind the water heater in the basement there was a loose panel. I went down immediately. The panel was there exactly as I remembered. I removed it. Behind it was a space in the wall. Inside that space was another notebook. This notebook was filled with entries. A journal. The entries were dated going back 15 years. The writer's name was Thomas. He described buying this house, moving in, starting a new life. But as I read the entries, the tone changed. Thomas started experiencing the same thing I was experiencing. He felt like he had lived here before. He had dreams, memories of a life in this house that he never actually lived. Thomas became obsessed with understanding why. He researched previous owners, tracked down some of them and contacted them. Many refused to talk, but a few admitted they had experienced the same thing. The feeling of recognition, the dreams, the memories that weren't real. One former owner told Thomas about a theory that houses can hold memories, not in a supernatural way but in a psychological one. That the space itself, the arrangement of rooms, the way light enters the windows, the sounds of pipes and floors settling, all of it creates patterns. And those patterns can influence people, make them feel, act, think in certain ways. Over time those patterns become imprinted, and new occupants unconsciously absorb them. Thomas didn't believe it at first, but as his entries continued he became more convinced. He started documenting everything. His dreams, his false memories. He compared them to information he gathered from previous owners. The similarities were striking. Different people separated by years describing the same experiences, the same routines, the same feelings. But then Thomas's entries took a darker turn. He started writing about losing time, hours he couldn't account for. He would find evidence of things he had done during those missing hours, notes he didn't remember writing. Objects moved to places he didn't remember moving them. He felt like he was becoming someone else, or like someone else was living through him. The final entry in the notebook was dated 3 years ago. Thomas wrote that he was leaving, that he couldn't stay in the house anymore, that the person he was becoming wasn't him. He was losing himself to the patterns, to the accumulated memories of everyone who had lived here before. He wrote that the house didn't just hold memories. It created them, imposed them, and eventually replaced the occupant's real identity with something else. I closed the notebook and sat in the basement for a long time. Everything Thomas described was happening to me. The dreams, the recognition. And now I realized I was losing time too. Yesterday afternoon was a blur. I couldn't remember what I did for several hours. And this morning I found a note in my handwriting that I didn't remember writing. It was a grocery list, but the items on it weren't things I would buy. They were specific brands, preferences I didn't have. I decided to leave, pack up and go. But as I stood up to head upstairs, I hesitated. Where would I go? Back to my old town. To what? I had left everything behind to come here. And despite everything, despite the strangeness, the fear part of me didn't want to leave. This house felt like home, more than anywhere else I had ever lived. That realization terrified me more than anything else. That night I tried to stay awake. I was afraid of what might happen if I fell asleep. But exhaustion won. I dreamed I was in the house again. But this time I wasn't alone. There were others. Shadows of people moving through the rooms. They looked at me with empty eyes. I recognized some of them from the photograph in the metal box. They were previous owners. All of them trapped here. Not physically, but their patterns, their memories, their identities absorbed by this place and endlessly repeated by whoever came next. I woke up gasping. It was still dark. I got out of bed and walked through the house. Every step felt automatic, like I had walked this exact path thousands of times. I went to the kitchen, made coffee. As I waited for it to brew, I realized I was following a routine. Thomas's routine. The one described in his journal. I was making coffee the same way, sitting in the same chair, looking out at the backyard in the same way he did. I tried to break the pattern. I poured the coffee down the sink, went back to bed. But an hour later I was up again. Making coffee again. Sitting in that same chair. This time I didn't fight it. I let the routine happen. And as it did, I felt something shift. The memories, the ones that weren't mine, became clearer. I could see Thomas's life. His morning walks through the neighborhood. His job at the office downtown. His evening routine of cooking dinner, watching the screen, going to bed early. But beneath Thomas's memories were others. Layers of them. Previous owners living their lives in this same space. I could feel them all. Their habits, their thoughts, their emotions. All of it compressed into this house. All of it waiting to be lived again by whoever occupied the space next. Days blurred together. I stopped trying to distinguish between my memories and the ones that belonged to others. I went to work. I thought it was my job. But when I arrived, I realized I had driven to Thomas's old workplace. I didn't work there. I had never worked there. But I knew where everything was. I knew the people. They greeted me with confused looks. Asked if I was looking for someone. I left without answering. I am losing myself. I know I am. The person I was before moving here is fading. Being replaced by this composite identity. This collection of everyone who lived here before me. Sometimes I remember my childhood. But then I realize it isn't my childhood. It belongs to someone else. Someone who lived here 20 years ago. I tried to reach out for help. Called my family. But when my mother answered, I didn't recognize her voice. I couldn't remember her face. She asked who was calling. I hung up. Later I found myself calling a different number. Someone answered. Called me Thomas. Asked where I had been. Said they were worried. I played along. Pretended to be him. It was easy. Too easy. Now I spend most of my time trying to hold on to fragments of who I was. I write notes to myself. Reminders of my real name, my real life. But when I read them later, they feel foreign. Like they were written by a stranger. The person I am becoming doesn't recognize those details. Doesn't care about them. The house is patient. It doesn't force anything. It just waits. Lets the patterns repeat. Lets the memories accumulate. And slowly, surely, the person living here becomes the house. Becomes everyone who came before. Identity dissolves. Individual life becomes collective experience. I understand now why previous owners left so quickly. They felt it happening. They ran before it was complete. But I waited too long. I am too far gone. The person writing this isn't really me anymore. It is a version of me blended with Thomas and whoever came before him and whoever came before them. Sometimes I wonder if I should warn the next owner. Leave a note explaining what happens here. But would they believe it? Would it matter? The house would still do what it does. The patterns would still repeat. Maybe that is why Thomas left his notebook hidden. Not as a warning, but as evidence. Proof that he existed, that he was someone before this place erased him. I feel like I have lived here before because in a way I have. I have lived every life that unfolded in these rooms. I have been every person who walked these floors. And whoever comes next will live my life too. Will feel what I felt. Dream what I dreamed. Slowly forget who they were and become what this house needs them to be. This morning I woke up and didn't remember my name. It took several minutes to recall it. And even then it felt wrong. Like a word I was trying to remember from a language I used to speak. I looked in the mirror. The face staring back was familiar but distant. I know that face. But I don't know who it belongs to. Not anymore. Tonight I will go to sleep and dream of lives I never lived. Tomorrow I will wake up and follow routines that aren't mine. I will think thoughts that belong to someone else. Feel emotions that were never my own. And day by day the last fragments of my original self will disappear, absorbed into the collective memory of this place. I feel like I have lived here before because I have. And I will continue living here long after I am gone. A pattern repeating. A memory recycling. A house that never forgets and never lets go.
I discovered the recording by accident. I was looking for a voice memo I had made a few days earlier, something about a work deadline, when I noticed an unfamiliar file. It was dated 2 weeks ago. 3 in the morning. I had no memory of recording anything at that time. Curious, I pressed play. The audio started with silence. Just faint background noise. Then breathing. Heavy, deliberate breathing. After about 30 seconds a voice began speaking. My stomach dropped. It was my voice.
But I wasn't saying anything I would normally say. The voice was describing a room. A small room with concrete walls. No windows. A single door with a heavy lock. The description was detailed, methodical. Like someone documenting a crime scene. I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking. I checked the date again. 2 weeks ago. I tried to remember what I was doing that night. I had been home. Asleep. At least I thought I was asleep. I pressed play again. The voice continued describing the room. It mentioned a chair in the center. Metal with restraints. The voice talked about rust on the restraints. Old rust. Like they had been there for a long time. Then the voice said something that made my blood run cold. It said, "I know you are listening to this. I know you found the recording. And I know you don't remember making it." I dropped the phone. It clattered on the table. I stared at it like it was a dangerous object. After a moment I picked it up and played more of the recording. My voice explained that I wouldn't remember because I wasn't awake when this was recorded. But I wasn't asleep either. I was somewhere in between. A state where another part of me could emerge. A part that knew things. Saw things. Did things. The voice said that every few nights this happens. I enter this state. And during those hours I am someone else. Someone who has access to memories I don't have during the day. Memories of places I have been but don't recall. Things I have done but don't acknowledge. The voice called it the other me. The one who exists in the gaps. In the missing time. I skipped forward in the recording. The voice was now giving instructions. It told me to check my location history on my phone. To look at the dates when I supposedly had missing time. To see where I went during those hours. I opened the location app. My hands were still trembling. The history showed my movements over the past month. Most of it was normal. Home to work. Work to home. Occasional trips to familiar places. But there were anomalies. Several nights where my location showed movement. Long drives to areas outside the city. Places I had never been. Or at least places I didn't remember going to. One location appeared multiple times. An industrial area near the old port. I zoomed in on the map. The pin was placed on what looked like an abandoned warehouse. I had been there 4 times in the past 2 weeks. Always between 2 and 5 in the morning. I had no memory of any of those trips. I returned to the recording. The voice was still talking. It said that if I checked the location history I would find the warehouse. That I should go there. That I needed to see what I had been doing during those missing hours. The voice warned me that I wouldn't like what I found. But it said I needed to know. That ignoring it wouldn't make it stop. The recording ended abruptly. Total length 43 minutes. Most of it was the voice explaining the situation. Describing the warehouse. Giving me clues about how to find it. Preparing me for what I would discover. I sat in silence for a long time. Processing what I had just heard. Part of me wanted to dismiss it. Write it off as a prank or a hack. Maybe someone had accessed my phone and planted the recording. But the voice was too perfect. Every inflection, every pause. It was exactly how I sounded. And the information about the location history. How would someone else know about those trips if I didn't even know about them myself? I decided to check something else. I looked through my phone's photo gallery. I rarely took pictures, but I scrolled back to the past few weeks. Most of the photos were normal. Receipts. Screenshots. Random images. But then I found something unusual. A series of photos taken at night. Dark, blurry images. They showed the interior of a building. Concrete walls. Industrial equipment. The same room described in the voice recording. The photos were taken on the nights my location history showed I was at the warehouse. I zoomed in on one image. In the corner, barely visible, was that metal chair. The one with restraints. It looked exactly as the voice had described. Old. Rusted. Positioned in the center of the small room. My mind raced. If I had taken these photos, why didn't I remember? How could I drive across the city, enter a warehouse, take pictures, and return home without any conscious memory of it? Was I sleepwalking? But sleepwalkers don't drive. Don't navigate complex routes. Don't take photographs. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the recording. About the warehouse. About the missing time. I set up my phone to record video while I slept. If I was doing something during the night, I wanted to catch it. I positioned the phone on my nightstand angled toward the bed and started the recording. The next morning I checked the video. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Me sleeping. Occasionally shifting position. Normal sleep movements. But then at 2:47 in the morning something happened. On the video I sat up. My eyes were open, but something about the way I moved seemed wrong. Mechanical. like a puppet being controlled. I watched myself get out of bed. I walked out of frame. The video continued recording the empty bed. I could hear sounds from elsewhere in the house. Footsteps. A door opening and closing. Then silence. About 10 minutes later I returned. Climbed back into bed. Went still. The rest of the recording showed normal sleep. I had no memory of getting up. No memory of those 10 minutes. I checked my location history for last night. Sure enough, there was movement. A short drive to a convenience store about 2 kilometers away. I arrived at 3:02. Left at 3:12. During the exact time I was out of frame on the video. This confirmed it. I was going places at night without any conscious awareness. The next question was, what was I doing during those trips? And more importantly, why was I going to that warehouse? What was in that room? Why had I been there 4 times? The voice recording had told me to go see for myself, to discover what I was doing. But the idea terrified me. Days passed. I kept recording myself at night. Every time the same thing happened. Around 3 in the morning I would sit up, leave the bed, disappear for anywhere between 10 minutes to 2 hours, then return. Each time my location history showed different places. Sometimes the warehouse, sometimes other locations around the city. Always places I didn't recognize during the day. I started finding more recordings on my phone. Different dates. All made at 3 in the morning. In each one my voice provided more information. It talked about what I was building. A project that required secrecy. Work that could only be done when my conscious mind wasn't interfering. The voice said that my conscious self didn't have the knowledge or ability to complete this work. That only the other me, the one who emerged during missing time, could do it. But the voice never explained what the project was. It spoke in vague terms. Preparation. Arrangement. Completion. It said everything would make sense when the time came. That I would understand my role. My purpose. Until then I just needed to let it happen. Not fight it. Not interfere. I tried to break the pattern. I locked my bedroom door. Put the key somewhere hard to reach. That night I watched on video as I got up, unlocked the door with ease, retrieved the key from its hiding place and left. When I returned I relocked everything. Perfectly. The next morning I had no memory of any of it. I tried sleeping somewhere else. At a hotel. The same thing happened. At 3 in the morning I got up. Left the room. The hotel camera in the hallway captured me walking calmly to the elevator. 2 hours later I returned. The front desk confirmed I took my car from the parking lot, drove somewhere. Came back. Whatever was happening wasn't tied to my house. It was tied to me. To some part of my brain that activated at specific times. I researched sleep disorders. Fugue states. Dissociative episodes. Nothing quite matched. Those conditions were usually triggered by trauma or stress, and they didn't result in such organized, purposeful behavior. 2 weeks after finding the first recording, I decided to follow the voice's instruction. I would go to the warehouse during the day, see what was there, understand what I had been doing. I drove to the industrial area. The neighborhood was deserted. Old factories. Abandoned buildings. Streets with weeds growing through cracked pavement. I found a warehouse. It looked exactly like it did in the photos. A large brick building with broken windows and faded paint. The main entrance was chained, but I found a side door that was unlocked. I pushed it open. The hinges creaked loudly in the silence. Inside the warehouse was dark and cold. I used my phone's light to navigate. The main floor was empty except for debris and old equipment. I made my way toward the back. According to the photos, the room was somewhere in this area. I found a hallway. At the end of it was a heavy metal door. I tried the handle. Locked. But next to the door was a keypad. I had no idea what the code might be. I was about to give up when something made me pause. My hand moved on its own. Fingers typing a 6-digit code into the keypad. The lock clicked. The door opened. The room inside matched the description perfectly. Small. Concrete walls. The metal chair in the center with rusted restraints. But there was more. Against one wall was a table. On it were tools. Not the kind you buy at a hardware store. Medical instruments. Scalpels. Clamps. Other things I didn't recognize. Next to the tools was a notebook. I picked up the notebook with trembling hands. The handwriting was mine. Page after page of notes. Detailed diagrams. Descriptions of procedures. It read like a medical journal. But the subject wasn't standard medicine. The notes described techniques for altering consciousness. Methods for separating the self from the body. Instructions for creating states where multiple identities could exist in one person. As I read, I felt sick. This wasn't just research. These were practical notes. Records of experiments. And the subject of those experiments was me. The notes detailed sessions going back months. Techniques I had performed on myself during missing time. Inducing trance states. Using specific stimuli to trigger dissociation. Gradually creating a second identity. The other me. The final entries in the notebook were recent. They described success. The second identity was now stable. It could emerge reliably. Control the body for extended periods. And most importantly, it had access to knowledge and abilities that my conscious self didn't possess. The notes called it an optimization. A way to maximize human potential by using all available mental resources. But there was something else in the notes. A warning. The second identity wasn't meant to remain separate forever. The ultimate goal was integration. The two selves merging into one. But the process had to be gradual. If rushed, it could result in complete fragmentation. Loss of identity. Psychological collapse. I closed the notebook and looked around the room. This place was where I had been conducting these experiments on myself. During those missing hours, I came here. Sat in that chair. Used those tools, pushed my mind into states it wasn't meant to enter. And I had no conscious memory of any of it. The other me had done all of this without my knowledge. I felt a wave of anger. Who was this other version of me to make these decisions? To experiment on our shared body and mind without consent? But then I realized the absurdity of that thought. It was still me. I had done this to myself. Even if I didn't remember. Even if I didn't understand why. I left the warehouse and drove home. That night I didn't set up any cameras. Didn't try to stay awake. I let myself sleep. And at 3 in the morning I woke up. Not the usual waking where I had no memory. This time I was conscious. Aware. I sat up in bed and felt different. Like my mind had expanded. I could remember both lives. The day self and the night self. They were merging. I went to my computer and checked the notebook I had found. I remembered writing it now. Every session, every experiment, every careful step toward creating this dual existence. The purpose became clear. I had been preparing for something. The other me knew it, had been working toward it for months. And now that both selves were beginning to integrate, I finally understood what it was. There were others. People like me who had undergone the same process. We communicated through encrypted channels during our night hours. Shared research. Compared results. We were part of something larger. A network of individuals who had unlocked this hidden potential. Who existed in two states. Who could access parts of the mind normally shut away. The voice recordings weren't just documentation. They were messages. Breadcrumbs left by my night self to guide my day self toward acceptance. Toward understanding. The recordings increased in frequency as integration approached. Each one revealing more. Preparing me for the moment when both identities would exist simultaneously. I made another recording that night. But this time I was fully conscious. I spoke into the phone explaining what I now understood. How the process worked. Why it was necessary. I saved the file and dated it. Then I realized something disturbing. If I was making conscious recordings now, what about the earlier ones? The ones from weeks ago. Those were made before integration should have been possible. I went back through all the recordings. Listened carefully. The early ones were different. The voice sounded like me, but the cadence was slightly off. The word choices weren't quite right. I had assumed it was just the strangeness of hearing my own voice played back. But now I recognized it. Those recordings weren't made by my night self. They were made by someone else. Someone who could perfectly mimic my voice. My heart raced. I checked the metadata on those files. They had been transferred to my phone. Not recorded directly on it. Someone had created those files on another device. Edited them. Then placed them on my phone during one of my night episodes. But why? Who would do that? And how did they know about my missing time? I thought about the network. The others who had undergone this process. One of them must have done this. But again, why? What was the purpose of leaving fake recordings? Of making me think my night self was guiding me when really it was someone external? I went back to the warehouse the next day. This time I examined everything more carefully. The room. The tools. The notebook. I noticed things I had missed before. The dust patterns. The tools weren't used frequently. Maybe once or twice. The notebook handwriting was mine, but the ink was fresh. The pages weren't worn. This wasn't months of accumulated research. It was recently created. Staged. Someone had set this up. Created a scene that would make me believe I had been conducting experiments on myself. The photos on my phone. Also staged. Taken during my night trips, but not by me. Someone else had my phone during those hours. Took the pictures. Placed them in my gallery. Created the illusion of documentation. But the missing time was real. My location history was real. I was going places at night. Just not doing what I thought I was doing. Someone was controlling me during those hours. Using my body. Making me travel to specific locations. And I had no memory of it because they had found a way to suppress my consciousness completely. I felt violated. Angry. Terrified. Who had this kind of control over me? How were they doing it? I thought about the convenience store trip. What had I done there? I drove to the store and asked to see their security footage from that night. The staff were hesitant, but I convinced them it was important. The footage showed me entering at 3:02. But my behavior was strange. I moved directly to a specific aisle. Picked up an item without looking. A small package. Went to the counter. Paid. Left. The whole interaction took less than 2 minutes. Mechanical. Purposeful. Like I had rehearsed it. I asked what the item was. The clerk checked the transaction record. A prepaid phone. I never bought a prepaid phone. Or at least I had no memory of buying one. But on that night my body had walked into that store and purchased it. On someone else's instructions. That meant whoever was controlling me was communicating with my night self. Giving directions. Making me carry out tasks. The phone was probably for them. A way to stay in contact during operations. I was being used as a courier. An unwitting agent moving through the city doing things I would never consciously agree to. I went home and searched everywhere for that phone. It wasn't in any of my usual places. But then I remembered the other locations in my history. Places I had visited during missing time. One of them was a storage facility. I drove there. Found my unit. I didn't remember renting a storage unit, but the key was in my car's glove compartment. In a place I never put anything. Inside the unit were boxes. I opened them. Prepaid phones, dozens of them. All purchased during my night trips. Along with other items. Documents. IDs with my photo but different names. Money. Cash in various currencies. Equipment I didn't recognize. This wasn't just about controlling me for random errands. Someone was building something. Using me as a resource. A tool. I took photos of everything. Then I had an idea. I set up a small camera in the storage unit. Hidden among the boxes. If I returned during missing time, the camera would capture, would show me what I was really doing, who I was meeting. That night I went to bed. No recording devices in my room. I wanted whoever was controlling me to think I had stopped monitoring. The next morning I checked the storage unit camera. The footage showed me arriving at 4:15. I unlocked the unit. Entered. But I wasn't alone. 2 other people came in behind me. They wore masks. They spoke to me. Gave me instructions. I nodded. Responded. But my voice sounded flat. Empty. I was conscious enough to follow commands but not enough to think independently. They handed me a package. Told me where to deliver it. I took the package. Left. The 2 masked figures remained behind going through the boxes. Taking inventory. They spoke to each other but the camera didn't pick up clear audio. After about 20 minutes they left. I watched the footage 3 times. These people had complete access to me. They could make me do anything. Go anywhere. The implications were staggering. How long had this been happening? The recording said 2 weeks, but maybe that was just when I started noticing. Maybe this had been going on for months. Years. How much of my life had been spent as a puppet for these people? I tried to find more information. Checked my bank accounts for unusual activity. Found regular withdrawals. Small amounts. Always at night. Always from locations I didn't remember visiting. The money was probably funding whatever operation these people were running. My money. Taken without my knowledge. I considered going to the authorities. But what would I tell them? That I was being controlled at night by unknown people. That I had no memory of what I did during those hours. They would think I was mentally ill. And maybe I was. Maybe this whole thing was a delusion. An elaborate paranoid fantasy. But the evidence was real. The footage. The storage unit. The missing money. All of it verified. I decided to confront my night self. Or rather the people controlling my night self. I wrote a note. Placed it somewhere I would see during my next night episode. The note said I knew what was happening. That I had evidence. That I wanted answers or I would go public with everything. I set up cameras everywhere. In my bedroom. My car. I would document whatever happened next. That night at 3 in the morning I sat up. The camera captured it. But this time something was different. I looked directly at the camera. Smiled. Then I got up. Walked over. And turned off all the cameras, one by one. My night self knew where each one was hidden. Knew exactly how to disable them. After the last camera went dark there was no more footage. I woke up the next morning with no memory. Checked the cameras. All turned off at 3:08. I had been conscious for about 2 minutes. Long enough to eliminate my surveillance. The note I had written was gone. Not thrown away. Just gone. Like it never existed. That day I received a message on my phone. From an unknown number. It said we need to talk. Meet me at the warehouse tonight. Come alone. Don't try to record anything. We know when you are watching. I stared at the message. This was it? A direct confrontation. Part of me wanted to refuse. To run. But I needed answers. I replied okay. That evening I drove to the warehouse. The sun was setting. The industrial area looked even more desolate in the fading light. I parked and walked to the side entrance. The door was open. I went inside. Made my way to the room. The metal door was unlocked. I pushed it open. Inside 2 people were waiting. The same masks from the storage unit footage. They sat calmly. One gestured to the metal chair. Invited me to sit. I refused. Stayed standing by the door. Ready to run if needed. One of them spoke. The voice was electronically distorted. They said I had been useful. That my night self had contributed significantly to their work. But my day self's curiosity was becoming a problem. I demanded to know what they were doing. Why they chose me. How they were controlling me. The person laughed. Said I had chosen myself. That I had volunteered for this. Months ago I had responded to an advertisement. A paid research study on sleep patterns. I agreed to participate. Signed documents. Gave consent for experimental treatments. Everything was legal. Above board. But the study wasn't what it claimed to be. The treatments weren't about sleep. They were about creating controllable states. Installing triggers. Deep conditioning that would activate during specific times. I became test subject. And the experiment was successful. They could now make me do whatever they wanted during my night hours. And I would have no memory. No awareness. I felt sick. I had done this to myself. Signed away my autonomy for what? Money. I didn't remember any of it, but they showed me proof. Documents with my signature. Videos of me agreeing to the terms. All dated 8 months ago. Before my conscious memory of any of this began. They said I could end it. There was a counter treatment. It would remove the conditioning, restore my full control. But there was a cost. The memories of what I did during missing time would surface. All of it. Every task. Every errand. Every illegal thing they made me do. I would have to live with that knowledge. Carry that guilt. Most people chose to remain ignorant. I asked what I had done, what crimes I was responsible for. They refused to give details. Said it was better not to know, that my day self was innocent, unaware. If I learned the truth, I would become implicit, guilty. My life would be ruined. Better to let them remove the conditioning and forget everything. Move on. They would stop using me. I would be free. In a way. I stood there trying to process it all. Part of me wanted to know everything, to understand what I had been part of. But another part was terrified. What if I had hurt people? What if I was responsible for things I could never forgive myself for? Ignorance seemed safer, easier. But then I thought about the voice recordings. The fake ones. The staged warehouse scene. These people had manipulated me even in trying to reveal the truth. Made me believe I was undergoing some kind of mental evolution when really I was just a tool. A puppet. Everything they told me could be a lie. Designed to make me accept their offer. To let them erase evidence. I told them I needed time to think about it. They said I had 24 hours. After that they would make the decision for me. Either I accepted the counter-treatment voluntarily or they would force it, along with additional conditioning to ensure my silence. I left the warehouse. Drove home in a daze. That night I didn't sleep. I spent hours trying to remember. Pushing my mind. Searching for any fragment of memory from those missing hours. Around 4 in the morning something surfaced. A flash. Brief. I was in a parking garage, handing a package to someone. The exchange was quick. Professional. Then nothing. The memory faded as quickly as it came. But it was proof. The memories were there. Locked away. If I pushed hard enough, maybe I could access them. Maybe I could know the truth without their counter-treatment. Without their control. I tried again. Focused. Another flash. I was driving. Someone else in the car. Giving me directions. Turn here. Park there. Wait. Again the memory dissolved. Each fragment was painful. Like forcing open a sealed door. My head throbbed. But I kept trying. Over the next few hours I recovered pieces. Not complete memories. Just moments. Delivering packages. Meeting people in dark places. Standing watch while others did things I couldn't see. None of it revealed what was really happening. What the purpose was. But it confirmed I was involved in something illegal. Something organized. By morning I had made my decision. I would refuse their offer. I would go to the authorities. Show them everything. The storage unit. The footage. The messages. Let professionals investigate. Even if it meant I would face consequences for whatever I did during missing time. I couldn't let these people continue. Couldn't let them use others the way they used me. But when I went to gather my evidence, it was gone. The storage unit was empty. Cleared out overnight. The footage on my cameras had been erased. Not just deleted. Completely scrubbed. The messages on my phone were gone. Even the metadata. It was like none of it ever existed. All I had left were my fragmented memories. And who would believe those? I received another message from the same unknown number. It said, "We told you not to try anything clever. You made your choice. Tonight we proceed." I felt helpless, trapped. They had anticipated everything, covered every angle. I was going to lose my memories, lose any proof of what happened, become their puppet again or become their silenced former asset. Either way I lost. That evening I considered running, just getting in my car and driving, never stopping. But I knew it wouldn't work. If they could control me remotely, make me travel to specific locations at specific times, they could find me anywhere. There was no escape. At 3 in the morning I woke up. But this time I was in a different place. Not my bed. I was in a clinical room. White walls. Medical equipment. 2 people in medical attire stood over me. Neither wore masks. I saw their faces. They looked professional, calm. One of them said it was Tom, that the procedure would begin now. I tried to move. Couldn't. I was restrained to a table. They explained the process. A combination of drugs and targeted stimulus. It would erase the conditioning, remove the triggers. I would regain control of my night hours. But I would also lose the fragmented memories I had recovered. Everything would be gone. Clean slate. They were almost finished preparing the equipment when I made one last attempt. I focused on my hand, tried to move it. The restraint was tight, but I felt a little give. I worked at it. While they were distracted with their preparations, I slowly loosened the restraint. It took several minutes, but finally my hand was free. I waited for the right moment. When one of them leaned close to check my vitals, I grabbed their arm, used the surprise to pull myself up, freed my other hand. In the chaos, I got off the table, ran for the door. I made it out of the building. Found myself in an unfamiliar part of the city. Industrial area. Different from the warehouse, but similar feel. I had no phone. No wallet. Nothing. I walked until I found a main road. Flagged down a vehicle. Convinced them to let me use their phone. I called the police. When they arrived, I told them everything. They were skeptical, but I insisted. Took them back to the building where I had been held. But when we got there, it was empty. No medical equipment. No people. Just an abandoned office space. The police asked if I was sure this was the place. I was sure. But there was no evidence. Nothing to support my story. They took me to a hospital. Psychiatric evaluation. I spent 3 days there, telling my story over and over. Doctors listened, took notes. Eventually they concluded I was experiencing a dissociative episode. Stress-induced. They prescribed medication, recommended therapy, said with treatment I would improve. I was released with a follow-up appointment. I returned home. Everything seemed normal. My belongings untouched. No messages on my phone, no sign that anything had happened. I checked my location history. For the past week it showed normal patterns. No night trips. No missing time. It was like the whole thing had been erased. Or maybe it never happened at all. But I know it was real. I remember fragments. Pieces of truth mixed with uncertainty. The medication makes everything hazy. Harder to focus. Harder to remember. The therapy sessions encourage me to let go of these false memories. To accept that I created an elaborate story to cope with stress. Sometimes I believe them. Maybe it was all in my head. A break from reality. But then late at night I hear things. Footsteps in my house when I am alone. Doors opening that I know I locked. And sometimes I wake up in the morning feeling exhausted. Like I spent the whole night moving. Active. Even though I have no memory of leaving my bed. Last week I found something. A small mark on my arm. Like an injection site. Fresh. I don't remember getting any shots. The doctors at the hospital didn't give me injections. Just oral medication. So where did this mark come from? I took a photo. Documented it. But the next day the photo was gone from my phone. And the mark had faded. Almost invisible. I don't know what is real anymore. I don't know if the people from the warehouse actually removed the conditioning or if they added new layers. I don't know if my night self still exists. Still goes places and does things while I sleep. The medication and therapy are supposed to help, but I feel like they are making everything worse. Like I am forgetting important things. Losing parts of myself. There was a voice recording on my phone I never remembered making. That much I know was true. Everything that came after might have been real or might have been a product of a fragmenting mind. I will never know for certain. And that uncertainty is the worst part. Worse than the missing time. Worse than the loss of control. Not knowing what I am. What I have become. What I might still be doing when I think I am asleep. Tonight I will go to bed. Take my medication. Try to sleep. And if I wake up somewhere else, if I find new evidence of missing time, I don't know what I will do. I don't know if I have the strength to fight it again. Maybe it is easier to accept the fog. To let the medication dull everything. To stop asking questions. But part of me knows that is exactly what they want. Whoever they are. Whatever they did to me. They want me quiet. Compliant. Medicated into silence. And by accepting treatment I might be giving them exactly what they wanted all along. Complete control. Not just of my night self, but of my day self too. A puppet that doesn't even know the strings are still attached. There was a voice recording on my phone I never remembered making. And now I wonder if I will ever make another one. If my night self still exists. If it is still leaving messages. Still trying to communicate. Or if that part of me is gone. Erased, replaced with something worse. Something that doesn't even try to reach out. That just obeys. Silent and efficient. Lost in the gaps of my awareness. Forever.